Good evening, everyone. It's Doug from AR Watch, and we are back for the night edition of Expedition Alaska Day 2 coverage. So we're really excited to bring you some more in-depth coverage. We had our 2 p.m. update this afternoon that had a few nuggets in it, and we have been watching the dots steadily move through. I think there's only one more team still on the packraft, but they are getting close to the end. We have some really good movement throughout the transition and into that next trekking section. And I believe that maybe the top two teams are already off of that trek and on to the next bike. So we should be joined by some people from the race, hopefully, either Jeff, Hunter, or Nick, or maybe Randy. Somebody hopefully will be joining us in a little bit. But I'm going to dive right in. And I think the best way to talk about things tonight is to bring up the tracker and let's talk about how all of your teams are doing. So we're just going to throw it on in. All right. So I am going to turn on my phone. That way I have the live broadcast and I can see any comments or things that people might have. So feel free to leave your comments, and I'll try to answer questions as best I can. So as you can see, after our 2 o'clock update, if you missed our 2 o'clock update, we had a couple of teams that unfortunately went on a part of the railroad track that was off limits, and that was stated in the rules. And unfortunately, Ranger Up ended up having to be disqualified and moved into the non-competitive team, but they are still moving really, really well. And so they're right up in the front in the top four. But I want to start at the back this time and kind of work our way up. So I'm going to go down here to Coast to Coasters, and let's look at their track. So, where we left them last night is they were down at the bottom here at the transition area, and I think they were almost in the transition when we ended last night. So since then, they paddled the first paddle section, which it looks by their track that they kind of hugged the land there and then crossed over immediately. Super smart, especially if it's starting to get dark, which it probably was at that point. And then Jeff has described this area as probably the toughest bushwhacking area, especially where they're at right now. When we get to cover the 50-60 adventure, we'll look at kind of what ended up happening to them, and it can happen to anyone. So I'm hoping that Coast to Coasters are able to push through here. Let's zoom in a little bit. We'll see. Looks like they came up and went up the path up here, got up to this checkpoint 5, had to come back down the trail, moved their way over, got into the lower lake, got checkpoint 6. So good job getting that. Most of the teams, I think only 3 teams went over and got checkpoint 7, which is super smart, because this area right in here is probably some of the toughest bushwhacking of the entire course. And if you looked at the lead teams, they didn't go up this way because this river is actually, I think, going down this way. And in order to cross it and get up to this upper lake, Jeff was saying earlier that there's just a very small section that people can do it. And I want to turn on the satellite just so people can get an idea of how thick this stuff is around the area there. And so this river that's coming down is flowing this way. So you have to look for a way to kind of get across. And so most teams just continued on this waterway, got up to about here, and then got off and went up and over and down on this other side. But then the topo lines really show here where you can see how tight those are, especially on this inner shelf right here. That is probably pretty sheer, and it looks like it's pretty thick as well. And keep in mind, in this section, teams are also moving with their pack rafts. So not an easy thing. If they decided to deflate them to get over, that's a lot of time. And so if there was a trail, if there was something that was passable, then maybe they don't. And also they're trying to trek in dry suits probably at this point, so they're being careful. I think Nick and Hunter talked about how you don't want to be bushwhacking in those because you get a little pinprick in it, and now your dry suit that is keeping you dry in these crazy waters, now not only does it not keep you warm, but now it's not keeping you dry either. So, so teams had to be smart. So I would imagine that if once they make it through this section right here, which a lot of teams have had a difficult time with getting through here, this is actually the point where I think there's maybe a little bit of rapids in between the two sections. And it's probably the point that Ranger Up actually had somebody go in the water, then got extremely cold and made their way over to the railroad tracks over here. So hopefully they can get through there quick. You can see this is not the line of a clear path. So we'll continue to monitor them, and hopefully as we're talking, they'll get into this next section. They could also be taking a nap. I am all about taking, a 20-minute nap if you're exhausted and your team's exhausted. And especially when you're going to go paddle in some crazy waters in a pack raft, before you, like, if you have some land, get off, get a little nap, and keep pressing on. So we're rooting for Coast to Coasters to get to the next transition area. And now we'll move our way up from there. So Mad Cow, they have actually gone through transition and gotten their first checkpoint on this next trek section. So CP9. So they're moving good. I didn't get an update from Jeff in regard to the possibility that they went down the railroad tracks. So this was a section where this road and these tracks were off limits due to permitting. So we haven't got an update on that. Hopefully one of them will join us during the broadcast, and we'll be able to update that as we're live with you. So they decided to skip both 7 and 8, which at this point, I don't blame them. I would want to get off the water and start warming up and continue moving forward. So they have passed a couple teams, and I mean, there's 3 teams that are still behind them at this point. So they're moving good. We'll see what we can find out here in a little bit. Fragile Flowers, or as legendary Randy says, Fragile. I don't know how he says it. It was confusing. So they skipped 7. They seem to make it through that kind of treacherous area down here, semi unscathed, maybe getting out of the water, trying to figure out how they were going to get over to the next lake. But they seem to get through it relatively unscathed. And then they skipped 7, which I think is super smart at this point, but went up and looks like they got I would imagine that them not hitting that with the tracker just meant that maybe the boat that had the tracker didn't go all the way over to the point, or in that 10-minute period, they it didn't ping close enough. So we'll get an update on that later, but it looks like they went up and got that point. And now they're probably getting some rest and warmth and food. If you know anything about warrior races, you know that the volunteers that are in the transition areas are freaking amazing. I, for one, spend way too long in transition areas at C2C and any other race that I do with warrior. And that's because I'm friends with all those people now, and you can't get enough really good food or hugs from them. So, Sonia and Chris are there. I know Sonia sent me a picture earlier of they had a dog in TA1. So not this TA, But they had a dog and it felt a lot like Arthur the King. This pretty homely looking dog that clearly had not eaten. I posted some pictures on Air.watch earlier, named Lula, and she did not leave. She was sweet. She laid down next to Sonia and took a nap after getting a full belly, and I'm sure was sad to see racers come and go out of TA1. So they have their own Arthur the King story, and I think if you're watching this right now, you might have come watching because of that movie. I know that, and I hope it brings a lot more people to the sport. So, um, right now, Fragile Flowers is in transition. I know earlier this ability took an hour and a half nap here. I think, especially in this terrain, given the conditions and the terrain, being able to take a nap in a place that's controlled. I know that they have tents set up for people so where they can be away from the wind or rain, or I don't know what the weather is right now there. I think it's actually pretty decent, but you never know, it can change in a minute. So being able to have somewhere that's covered and controlled, I think is optimal for sleeping. And a lot of teams have not slept, or at least that's what it looks like on the tracker. I would imagine that it doesn't look like Breaking Butterflies, Mad Cow, Florida Extreme, or Go Live Your Adventure slept. And of the top four teams, the only team that I know that has slept is this ability. So we're gonna see how that plays out. You know, they banked some sleep early, and it's not actually like this ability to sleep that early, but getting that control might allow them to catch up and speed up when other people are starting to drag a little bit. So, so Fragile Flowers is there, and also they are there uh, with 5060 Adventure, and thank God they finally got out of this lower area. I think we talked about them on the 2 o'clock update, and I kind of want to go a little bit more in depth of what happened here. So they came into this section. Looks like they got into the lake, got the lake point really well, and then got in this area and really just couldn't figure out what they wanted to do or how they wanted to do it. My guess is they probably thought that if they took this route, then they could get up to the lower level of the Grant Lake and maybe get up there and avoid having to climb as much. Then they would only have one trek back across instead of having to go up, and down. So maybe they thought that this was less elevation gain, which I think is a smart move, but also super thick, according to Jeff. Some of the toughest bushwhacking in the area, and they were unfortunately back in the same area. They got to this point, went out, came back, and were back in that same area about 5 hours later. So that had to be a little frustrating. And it looks like they just aborted 7, went up to the point up here and got 8, and now are sitting in transition and probably warming up, getting some food in their system and trying to warm up before they head out on this next section. Now, it's 8 o'clock Eastern time, so a lot of us are getting darkness starting, or it looks at least like it's getting dark out there. It's still 4 o'clock there, so they still have plenty of sunlight left before, and I think they only get like about 4 or 5 hours of actual darkness a night in that area. And so hopefully they are going to be able to continue to move well. And it looks like that trail is actually, people have been moving on it really, really well. So, so that's 5060 Adventure. They definitely made an adventure out of that stage. But we're hoping that they continue to move well and can kind of make up for the lost time that they had there. So moving right up, we've got Breaking Butterflies, and we can come back now. Earlier when we looked at this, Breaking Butterflies did not show CPs 1, 2, 3, or 4, but now we can confirm they did hit all of those checkpoints. Now, I don't know if they hit the TA, forgot 4, and went back. Let me see if that was just something that happened in the transition or in the putting the points in, but it looks like they just went straight there. And then, I mean, it punches well after that, but I have no idea um, if that means that they backtracked or not. So, but they definitely went back. They got it. They got all 4 of those points. They got 5, 6. They had kind of the same issue here. Maybe it's really tough getting out of that water and getting across because everybody kind of has some squiggly lines there. A little shout out to Mark Latanzi, but some squiggly lines from their own tracker. So we don't know exactly what that meant, but they skipped 7 and 8. They basically just hugged the coastline, and I'm sure we're ready to be off the pack rafts at that point. And now they're moving really well. And you saw as we were looking, the tracker jumped from this northern point to a little bit further south. So they are now south of Carter Lake and moving pretty good around. So keep it up, ladies. You're doing really good. You are leading the race of the all ladies teams, which has been fun to watch. Fragile Flowers is right behind you, but we'll see. We'll kind of see how that play continues to play out. So moving up, we will go to well, let's hit Florida Extreme first, even though they're listed above them in the rankings. They may be together at this point. It's really hard to tell with the little time lapse. But if we know anything about this team, they are super tough, super strong. Brenda and Ron are just awesome and so experienced. I don't know Angel, but I know the other two, and I know they are pushing. They decided to skip 7. Let's see what it looked like going through that section. And here again, we have kind of the same thing. Looks like they spent a little bit of time in that area, and I think at that time there might have been several teams in that area, so maybe they were discussing what they were going to do and how they were going to do it, maybe taking a little break, getting things kind of put together and determining where they were going to go. They decided to skip 7, went to 8, got in and out of transition pretty quickly because that next point, it took them about 3 hours. So maybe they banked a little nap before they got out, but they're moving good now. And it looks like they're together right now with Go Live Your Adventure, or maybe right behind them. I'm not sure how. Let's see if we can see kind of how open that is in that area. I wonder, how close they are and when they will be able to start to know that there is another team in the area. It looks like this might be a little bit more open, but right now it looks like they're right in the thick of some foresty areas. So I can imagine how beautiful this area is. I mean, just look at the satellite imagery, like this mountain that's right there. They're just basically walking around it along the waterway. So I'm sure there's going to be some really great stories of wildlife and things like that they're seeing and experiencing. So hopefully they're getting a little bit of that. So then we move up to our top 4 teams, and Ranger Up is we're going to cover them in a second, but let's look at where this ability is. So this ability took an hour and a half nap. And they have moved really well since then. And I think Ranger Up actually left the TA maybe an hour ahead of them. So they are really making up some ground right now when it comes to where they are on the trek. I don't know how straightforward this area is. I know a lot of teams had issues in this area. And I wonder if so when I talked to Jeff earlier, he said that on this map, there is what looks like a stream bed that would come and go right here to the checkpoint along this. And if you go into the topo map, this one doesn't even show it. Let's see if, no, the rest of them don't show it either. However, if you look at the maps that I posted online, there actually is kind of a faint blue line that goes right here. But he said that that has been washed away. And so they are probably looking for that. It seems like every team has done this. They've gone up to where they see a little creek or a crossing, and they're like, okay, I must have gone too far. And then they backtrack, they come back and hit the point, and then they continue on. Bones took a little bit more adventurous section in there. But what I'm liking so far from this ability is they will admit that they sometimes do not focus as much directly out of transition. And they have bobbles. So I like to focus on where when they're coming out of transition and kind of what they've done. I mean, everything looks good so far. So we'll see. I mean, this seems like a pretty straight point to point section, but it's looked like that before. And, you come out, you're rested, you're fed, and you're not as focused on looking for the little trail. And you can blow right by it. We've all done it. So good to see that they're making up some time. So let's talk a little bit about Ranger Up. So they still seem to be moving really well. So if you want to see kind of where they were at checkpoint 10, so they hit checkpoint 10 at 1:23 local time. So at that point in the race, this ability hit checkpoint 10 at 2:40. So they were about an hour and 20 ahead of them going into that checkpoint. So we'll see at this next checkpoint if they're losing ground, if they're, maintaining that position, because it's really hard to tell on the tracker, but that's a lot of how I see how teams are continuing to do if they're holding the distance that they had in between checkpoints and the time, or if it's expanding. Like for instance, I will say that when they came out of this, so this ability hit checkpoint 9 at 11 o'clock. If we go over here to Warrior and we look at when they hit checkpoint 9, they hit checkpoint 9 at almost 7 o'clock. So just shy of 7 o'clock. So that is a huge difference, but this ability banks some sleep. So that will come into play later. And, when you're talking about an hour and a half of bank sleep, it's not like you hit the ground and you go to sleep. I mean, that is the way that you hope that it goes. And sometimes later in the race, as soon as you hit the ground, you're out. But a lot of times that hour and a half, like not every team member is getting the full hour and a half. Then you've got to get up and you've got to put your shoes on and your clothes on. Cause I'm sure, especially if they're in a tent, they're trying to get comfortable and air out, especially as soggy as it's been. So they've got to get up and get dressed and get moving and all of those things. So if other teams decide to take an hour and a half later and they do the same thing, that hour and a half could really be 2 hours with getting ready, getting down, getting back up again. So they could easily make up that time. So it's just an interesting dynamic that we'll continue to watch. Tonight's going to be a big night because I think that in the overnight, almost all of these teams will be through this trekking section. And tomorrow morning, we should see them onto the bike. Now, obviously, this is the lead team, but I'm going to skip to them real quick just to discuss like how long it took them to go from TA2 to TA3. So they are obviously super fast and moving really fast. but they went, at about 3:39, they hit TA2. And then they got to TA3 at 1:49. So basically in about 10 hours. So if you look at the speed of other teams, you're talking maybe 12 or 13 hours. So by 8 o'clock our time tomorrow morning, all of these teams should be off of the trek, except maybe coast to coasters, and it depends on how much longer 50, 60, and Fragile Flowers stay in that transition area. So we should see a big shift and moving into the next big stages. So let's talk about Warrior here for a minute. They had a pretty clean entry into this checkpoint down here. It looks like they did almost like what this ability did. They got to this point where like, okay, we must have gone too far, and they either backtracked and got to the point, and maybe the ping did not hit while they were doing it, but they went out and back and came back and then made their way, continued forward. They looked fresh according to Jeff in the transition areas. So he said they actually looked more fresh than Bones coming in and out of that transition, moving into the trek. I haven't talked to them since they hit this next transition into the bike. So I'm not 100% sure how they get over this little water section here. If they're gonna get their pack rafts again and have to just paddle over, because they're gonna get to here and then they've got to get across. So I am assuming that they're gonna give them their pack rafts again right here, and that they're gonna blow it up, and they're gonna get across. Then they're gonna have to deflate it, and then they're gonna get on their bikes, and then they're gonna move forward. So, unless actually I take that back, they are going to then have to paddle this way. So they are still paddling. So Team Bones is not off of the paddle yet. So they're going to move into this river section. So they're going to have to paddle all of this down the river and all the way down here to TA4. So that TA3, they must have gotten their pack rafts back. Then they're going to have to pack raft to this section. And that's what happens on live broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. So then they're going to have to come back and they're going to have to bike these points. And it looks like there was the CP that was directly across there. And then they're going to have to continue down and to the checkpoint. Or to the transition area. So then they're going to have to make their way around to these points. So 13, 14, 15, and then continue up. And this is a pretty big bike section. They are going to cover a lot of ground. And they're going to be basically not in telephone service for almost all of it. Because up here in this northern section, they may get a little bit of phone service around here on this upper side, but they're going to have nothing through here. The tower service has been pretty good as far as the tracker's concerned. But we're probably not going to get much from teams or from people on the ground during that time. But that should be good because the teams, it should be good for the volunteers on course because it'll give them a little bit of time to catch up, get some sleep, get the next TA ready once the last person is on their bike and moving. So we'll see how far the teams are spread out amongst about that time. They might not have as much time in between as expected. But so just to give you an idea of the separation between Bones and Warrior. So Bones hit CP 12 at 2:30, basically their time. So about 6:30 our time. And Warrior hit that at 4:02. So they are holding a good hour and a half on them. And I think that's been about the lead the entire time. So we're gonna see some strategy when it comes to sleep here in a little bit and how these two manage it, um, when they decide to take it, and how it plays out. So this is it's tight right now, and um, I think they had a little bit bigger lead, but again, if we go look at Bones, I want to show you what they did um, over here because I think some people were watching. In fact, I got a couple of messages from people going, "What happened?" And it looks like they blew right by the point. They got here and they went up, and then they were like, "We must have gone past it." And so then they came back, and it looks like they got the point, and then they continued moving forward. So that had to build a little frustration with the team. But good thing they had a good lead, and I don't think they ever saw Warrior. Um, in the first transition from the first bike to the paddle, Warrior came into the transition area right as um, Bones was paddling out. So I think Jesse pulled over to where the boats were and the bins were and could look out and see them paddling away. I don't know that they got that visual. And, you know, when you're racing for the lead like this, those kind of visuals can really impact you and say, all right, we're doing the right things. But when you don't see anybody, that can also, it can hurt some too. So I'm sure that the psychological games that are being, they're going through right now are difficult. So Nick is actually up here on this northern side of the water. So I don't know that we're gonna hear from him. Um, let's see if we can find there. Well, there's Jeff. So he's up there as well. I don't know if we're gonna hear from anybody. But if any of you are watching and you have questions, you want me to touch on anything, like I'm more than happy to talk about it. I know earlier in the conversation when we were talking about teams and, when you make mistakes, and there was a conversation about, I think, making sure that you don't panic. I don't think that was directed at any team specifically, but more in the general sense of when you make a mistake, you have to gather yourself, whether it's a huge nav error and it costs you a shit ton of time, or whether it's like somebody's hurt or injured, or in the case of Raindrop, wet and cold and freezing, and you got to figure out how to get them warm. And um, I think we've all been there. And making decisions in your darkest point is very difficult to make sound decisions. So I think when he was discussing that, I think that is what he was referring to in the panic, and that it's important to really think about what you're doing and how you're doing it moving forward, because that race, I mean, think about it. We're at the night of day 2 in our book, like watching them, right? They haven't even completed 48 hours. So to them, like to make a decision this early, um, you really need to think it through. Now, when we talked to Hunter earlier, um, he talked about how you can bank some time early by not going to get these things, so that maybe later in these CP rich sections, like this paddle where the points seem to be closer together, um, you can maybe get more points in the same thing, that like this distance to here, from here to here, might have been the same as the distance to get to from the lower section down here to CP7. And in this section, you could get 3 points. So you really have to look at that. And then this upper section, which is going to be the glacier section, teams can choose to do some of this, do none of this. But if you look just right here around the finish area, there are 6 points right here. But if you don't give yourself enough time later in the race, you're not going to be able to go get them. Now, I'm hoping that teams are going to give themselves enough time to get up here and do the glacier, because I think it's going to be such an epic point of this race. And I think I reached out to Jason Magnus. So if you're listening, Jason, we'd really love to have you on to talk about your experience on the glacier the last time that Expedition Alaska was there. If you haven't seen it, go search Expedition Alaska, go watch the show, and you'll find out what I'm talking about. Safety this year is super paramount, and they have been up there scouting. They have looked at all of these things, and I just think it's going to be an amazing experience. And I hope that every team gives themselves enough time to go up there and get this at the very end. And, obviously we'll talk about that closer to the end because it's right here by the finish. But I mean, this next bike section is going to get teams up there, but it is going to be a long day for people. It's a very long section, and I don't have kind of time estimates at this point, but maybe next time that we talk to Jeff, we can kind of find out what they're thinking when they were doing the scouting. So I think we've done a really great job tonight of talking about the teams and where they are and what they're going through. I'm hoping that the weather is better for them today and that it's not as wet as it was yesterday. I know it's still going to be cold, but hopefully they are now moving. They're trekking, so they're going to be able to stay a little bit warmer than they were paddling when you're not moving, your lower extremities, and kind of making sure that you continue to give yourself that ability to stay warm. So I'm just checking the tracker or the see if there's any comments on the Warrior page. So I've seen some comments on some of the things, and it's really not my place to address them because all I am is a commentator who's sitting in Northern Virginia talking about this race. But it seems like there are some concerned citizens about where these people are and what they're doing. And, when you're from an area and about how vehicles are on roadways and, safety concerns and things like that, we totally get that. What I can tell you and everybody who's at home and maybe seeing these comments is Jeff and the Warrior team have taken so many safety precautions. They have special EMTs that are with at each transition and are literally monitoring, and we're required by the permitting to be able to have them at all these places. So that's actually a luxury that is not at many adventure races, where there is not an on-staff paramedic sitting there waiting, monitoring radios and communications between the team. And I'm sure that they are on those sections of roadway that people are concerned about. And the other thing I will tell you is they are not on roadways much. If they are on a roadway, it is a necessity to get from point to point. And safety is the biggest concern. They all should have flashing lights. They all should have reflective gear. They all should be riding far right on the shoulder as possible. And so while I understand the concerns of citizens in the area, all of these people here are experienced adventure racers and kind of know what they're getting themselves into. So I appreciate you following along, and I hope that you will continue to. We are blessed to be able to have this race in your community. And so thank you for sharing that community with us. And we hope that you will be as passionate about supporting them as you are about warning us about safety concerns. So thank you, and we hope that you will continue to do that. Um, I don't think we're going to get, oh, look, it just looks like Nick and Jeff moved over to the next TA, which it looks like Bones is there or is close to there. And it looks like all of the support is kind of in this area here. So let's see kind of where they are. This is the TA. I mean, it's crazy when satellite of this water looks the color that this is. So it just, I can't imagine how beautiful it is in this area. And I don't know if the Starlink is going to hit there. I see that Hunter and Jeff are in the same location. It looks like Nick is still making his way back. I'm actually going to text Hunter and see if there's any way for him to hop on. So again, as much as I thank the local people who are watching this, I also want to thank all of the friends and family. I have received so many messages from people's friends and family that are watching, and thank you, because I can tell you as a racer, it means so much when you're out there because you're thinking about every single one of you that are there. And so just hearing from you and knowing that this means a lot to you, I know that your racers are thinking about you as well. So continue to send those messages. I really appreciate it. They're going to see it at the end of this as well. So because they're going to probably a week from now when they are rested and ready to start looking at everything. Hopefully they go back through the coverage and they'll be able to see us talking about them and seeing your messages of support. And I know that it means a lot. So I really appreciate it. So let's see if there's any movement from any, looks like they're still there. The ladies of Breaking Butterflies are moving really well. I'm excited to see that. Can't wait for all of them to get around. I mean, look how close these two are right now. We were talking about the fact that they might see each other. I mean, they are right on top of each other now. So, um, it just shows you stop to just do a little foot care. And next thing you know, you're walking up on somebody. And I can imagine how remote it is in these areas. There's probably no foot traffic or you're not seeing anybody for hours and hours. So it's probably very welcomed. And just as you were probably tired of hearing my voice only after an hour of these broadcasts, imagine what it's like to just listen to the same teammates now going on, 30 whatever hours we are into the race. Um, we are, yeah, we don't have a running clock, but yeah, we're a lot of hours into this race. And so when you get a chance to just hike with another team for a little while, if you're on the same, thing, it's super helpful and uplifting to share different stories and be able to just have a different perspective there for a little bit. So I know that's going to recharge people. And if you've ever been around Ron during a race, he's gonna he's gonna have some good stories and share some wisdom with you. Um, so it doesn't look like we're gonna have anybody joining us for this hour. I think I have said enough, and I'm not here just to hear myself talk. And I know you probably don't want to hear me. So we'll do probably another post tonight, or if not, then if nothing significant has changed, or if I don't get an update from Jeff, we'll look forward to our 8 a.m. Eastern time post, which will be 4 a.m. Alaska time. And I'll try to do my best in a dot watching post to discuss kind of where we are and what we're seeing. Again, if you weren't following at 2 o'clock, what we are going to do for the 2 o'clocks moving forward is they are going to be strictly really short updates. So they are going to be anything that is super vital, like today with the penalties, because I didn't want people to get on and see, obviously like Ranger Up is now non-competitive. What does that mean? So we want to be able to explain those things to you. So if anything like that comes up, we're going to try to cover it at the 2 o'clock. We're going to keep it between 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes at the most if we're talking to one of the people from the race. But for the most part, it's going to be basically just what quick updates we'll get through, and the 8 o'clock will be kind of full on. I should have more people jumping on the call next time. And so Jesse says that life stories take about 4 hours each. So they are out of their life stories at this point. So I love that. And that's why they're hoping to probably run into another team at this point. But yeah, so tomorrow night, 8 o'clock will be our big full update like this, but hopefully with somebody else. So you're not just listening to me. So thank you for tuning in. Hope you will continue to follow on AR.watch as we continue to post updates, pictures, videos that we get from the scene. Randy has the videos that most of the videos that have been put together by Randy. A couple of the reels I just put together based off of some videos and photos that we had. So thank you for continuing to support us. Continue to support Warrior. Go over to Legendary Randy's site too, because he is awesome. He is obviously a legend in this realm, and we hope that you will continue to support that. And we look forward to covering day 3 tomorrow. So hope you have a great night, and we will talk to you guys all tomorrow. So thank you again for following, and we'll see you soon.